Hello everyone, welcome back to my booktube channel. This is Sukaja here, coming at you live from April the 2nd. This is about the books that I read in the month of March. I'm going to be talking about that. I hope the year has been treating you well. Can't believe we're already into the 4th month of the year. The time is going pretty fast. Anyway, lots of reading to be done. I think I've been able to read around 9 books till date. I'm 2 books behind, which is why I decided to read a couple of graphic novels as well, just to kind of speed things up a bit. I'm going to show you the graphic novels I read, as well as one thriller and one feel-good novel that I read last month, which also happens to be a historical fiction novel. I'll start in the order that I've read these books. My first book of March was Zen Pencils, Dream the Impossible Dream by Gavin Ang Than, right? Very famous cartoonist. It's an inspirational story about how a lot of us, we have self-doubt, which kind of inhibits us from trying out new things that we're really passionate about. And this book kind of deals with that and the artist's journey, essentially. What I really liked about it is that it has different stories, different lovely illustrations inside. It's a fast read, very inspirational, a lot of real life scenarios to make you think. Very original tales as well, and you do have tales inspired by famous people as well, but this was a very modern and contemporary take and not very really famous people. There's a poem by Percy B. Shelley which has been made into a story. We have a story by the Dalai Lama. We also have a story by Amy Poehler. So there's a lot of things in here. Very nice to just sit down and read it in one shot. I don't think I'll be reading this again though, unless I really feel like. And after this, I thought, I should read and see what the first book was. So I started with the second book in the series. So this is the first book, and you're actually supposed to read it this way and then this, but there isn't really a workable order. So you can read either of these books at any time. So I personally preferred this one over the other one, simply because I felt it was more easier to relate to, and I felt like he had polished up his art cartooning skills by the time he got to the second book, and his illustration and writing skills basically. So the first book is again very similar. It is philosophical stories written by Gavin, way that is very nicely dispensed, because it is the medium that he chooses is one where he downplays all that fluff and he just brings out the essential message with very little use of space, which is pretty creative. This is again very inspiring. There are things about self-development in here. There's a story from John Green as well. And Neil Gaiman's Make Good Art in this book. Really nice, fun to read through. I would recommend it if you ever feel like reading a graphic novel. Feel free to try it out, and you might find some takeaways in either of these. Post reading those two, I got down to reading a book that has been on my TBR for the longest time. A friend, I'm going to give a special mention to Madhavi here, who recommended Keigo Higashino's The Devotion of Suspect, which has been on my TBR, but I didn't pick it up until she kind of nudged me. There's always this one friend for every bookworm who kind of always gives really good recommendations. So Madhavi, if you're watching, thank you for this. And Devotion of Suspect, where do I even begin? This is by far the best thriller that I read ever. I knew this before approaching it because I've heard good things, even from my father-in-law who's read the same book. I was so happy that I started reading it. It was simply unputdownable. Simply unputdownable. What an experience. What a carefully well thought out plot without any loopholes whatsoever. Very convincing. A book that I'm clearly excited to talk about, and would recommend to everyone if you want to read a good thriller and just curl up in one place and forget about the world and just read about a particular mystery or situation. I must say, I think this was so well developed and executed by Keigo Higashino. The story is essentially about a woman who is a mother. She's in fact divorced, and she's living by herself with her daughter in an apartment, when one day her ex-husband comes by asking for money, and then things escalate really fast. And I don't want to give too much of the plot away, so I'm going to try and be as cryptic as possible. But then so basically she gets into a very tricky situation where her neighbor steps in and kind of helps her, and her neighbor happens to be a maths teacher. So the neighbor decides to help because he has feelings for this mother who's recently been divorced. They cover this up. Whatever happens that night is covered up really well, and the investigation begins. What I liked about this is it's so readable. There is no justice, law and order jargon anywhere in this book. That would be a real turn off for me for any thrillers. This book is written with very short sentences, I think, and the type is just perfect. It's really nicely spaced, and I think this is a minimal requirement. Also, like the size of these Japanese books, this one and Breast and Eggs, they're all like published in this really short and small format, which is good for putting into your handbag and just reading when you're on the metro or something. So really like that. So yeah, really intriguing characters in here, characters who feel really well-rounded and full of, you know, like they know what they're doing, they know exactly what they're doing. This book is written with intent and purpose. Always wanted to use those words to describe a book. Anyway, so highly recommend that you pick up this sensational Japanese thriller. I'm definitely personally looking forward to reading more of Higashino. I know that he's got a few books out, including Malice, which I've heard multiple things about. If you think you know the next Higashino that I should be reading, please put it down in the comments below. I am eager to hear from you so that I can pick it up. Yeah, so really exciting, had a fun time reading this. This is 5 out of 5 stars. I couldn't have done a better job myself. I think this book was executed and written so well. The plot was so good, fast-paced, and just I think the end was also carried out really well, and I was quite satisfied, like really good payoff for readers reading this book, so highly recommend it. Lastly, I just finished reading this book, so I'm still putting this part of my March reading wrap up. This is Dear Mrs. Bird by A.J. Pierce. This novel, I just happened to go to a bookshop, an independent bookshop one day, and I was like, I don't know what to read and I want to pick up a new book, and no one really told me about what book to pick up, so I didn't have an agenda when I went to the shop. I just looked around and I looked at this cover and it kind of looked really intriguing. I read the blurb and I really liked it because I'm a sucker for World War II stories, tales set during the war. I just love them, and I personally enjoy reading about circumstances that I can't imagine having ever lived through, even in my past lives. So this book is set during World War II, and it is about the publishing industry essentially, and it's about this character called Emmeline who works for a publishing house in 1941. She is somebody who wants to become a war correspondent and get into journalism. That's her ultimate goal, but then she ends up working for an advice columnist for this magazine called Women's Friend, which is a magazine all about women's issues that covers women's issues from cooking to baby care to everything else. This isn't just about her and the magazine, the advice column. This is essentially about the war and life during the war and raids that happen in London 1941. Also about friendship, mainly about friendship. It's definitely a feel-good story. I would recommend this for people who liked Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. If you enjoyed that, pick this up. But go back to my historical fiction recommendations video and go through that. So if you like any of those books there, definitely pick this up. This really transported me to London 1941, and I felt like this is one of those books that made me emote so much. There were moments when I wanted to laugh out loud, and I was. There were moments when I was almost on the verge of tearing up because the story was so like touching. This is a debut novel. There's now a sequel as well, and I have the sequel with me. I'm going to be reading that in April, hopefully. It's pretty much all the books I read in the month of March. I think March was a pretty decent reading month for me, but I'm hoping April will turn out even better. So fingers crossed. We'll be back with more reading updates soon. If you ended up watching this video until this point, thank you so much for doing that, and leave a cat emoji in the comments so that I know that you did watch it. That's about it from my side. I will definitely be putting up more YouTube videos, so thank you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sane, and I will see you soon. Bye.